I reject the idea that the Bible I read is a partisan political document and contains a blueprint for any one political orientation.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is the State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush in New York City.
I think it is the job of a senator to hold fast to the foundational freedoms of our republic. I think freedom of religion is among those most basic and eternal. And I think when we fail to remember that and to give it life and purpose and meaning, we no longer deserve the freedoms for which our forebears fought.
On June 16th, an important publication was released by Interfaith Alliance, the Center for American Progress, and partner organizations. It is a collection of brilliant essays from prominent voices, bringing diverse and varied perspectives to the essential principle that's right here in the report's title: Religious Liberty for All, celebrating this founding freedom at America 250. This week, I'm excited to share highlights from this event and underscore the message that an inclusive vision for our nation is not only what the founders had in mind, but the only hope for ensuring our democracy survives and thrives. And make sure you listen to the end of the show, because you are going to want to hear Senator Chris Coons from Delaware. His remarks were amazing.
And we're live on match day as Doug reaches for a buffalo wing. He's got it! Oh, and he's gone for a can of Pepsi too! What a finish! There's no doubt about it. It just tastes better. Match days deserve Pepsi.
We need voices like these heard now more than ever. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. Taking a minute to do these things really helps other people discover our show and become listeners too. Our library of past conversations includes over 180 hopeful, empowering, and inspiring interviews with guests like Rabbi Sharon Brous, meditation teacher Sharon Salzberg, Bishop William Barber, and many, many others. You can help grow the State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out how at stateofbelief.com. And you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. On June 16th, Interfaith Alliance, the Center for American Progress, Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and the American Humanists Association hosted an event to launch the new report, Religious Liberty for All, celebrating this founding freedom at America 250. It's a powerful document featuring 20 respected voices speaking to this cornerstone of our democracy and national identity. US Senator Chris Coons was the keynote speaker, and on panels, I was joined by Rachel Lauser of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, Fish Stark of the American Humanist Association, Ria Chakrabarti of Hindus for Human Rights, Chris Crawford of Interfaith America, and Reverend Adam Russel Taylor of Sojourners. Interfaith Alliance Vice President of Programs and Strategy, Dr. Guthrie Graves-Fitzsimmons, played a key role in pulling this event together, and he joins me now for an overview before we listen to some of these highlights. Guthrie, thank you again for joining us here on The State of Belief.
It's great to be back on the show, Paul.
So this is an idea that we thought of months before, when we knew that the question of America and 250, and specifically the religion identity and what religious freedom means for America, was actually going to be a contested question. And so you and our colleague, Maggie Siddiqui, and others got together and really thought, like, how do we want to make sure that the full story is included in this moment when we celebrate the 250th? I mean, talk to me about your thinking behind this report.
Really, this all started on May 1st of 2025, just a few months into the beginning of the Trump administration, when in a Rose Garden ceremony, the president and his Christian nationalist allies announced this Religious Liberty Commission. And the president tasked the commission with issuing a report by July 4th of 2026, which is the semi-quincentennial America's 250th anniversary. And so that was the mission that President Trump gave the Religious Liberty Commission, this commission that's all conservative Christians and one Orthodox rabbi on the commission. And I knew from the moment it was announced that we had to have a response. We had lunch a few weeks after that with our colleagues at Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and then brought in the Center for American Progress and American Humanist Association. And we came up with this idea of doing a counter report that the administration would have its biased, one-sided report only from these narrow conservative voices, but we would cast a wide net and feature religiously diverse voices from different religions, from secular and humanist traditions. Our goal from the very beginning was to have our report come out before the Trump administration report, and I'm proud to say we did. We got our report out, and the Trump administration has yet to put out its report that has been mired in controversy.
I think one of the most important ideas behind this report is that actually religious freedom has diverse interpretations, and it's actually for everybody. It's not actually meant to protect one class of religious individuals. It's meant really to make sure that everyone across the spectrum, including people who have worldviews that don't include religion, but equally deserve freedom. And that's what this report does. It's so well done in that regard, is that it allows the big mosaic, the big tapestry of American experience to all come together and say, we all value religious freedom because it makes each of us free. Can you mention some of the authors that are in this report? Just mention like the diversity of people who are included.
Sure. The first I would mention is the Reverend Dr. Corey D.B. Walker, the Dean of the School of Divinity at Wake Forest, who offered a profound reflection out of the Baptist tradition in his approach to how the separation of church and state is good for both, and this history of religious liberty that we have to live into. And we're fortunate to have several different Baptist contributors to this report, including Holly Holman, the Chief Legal Officer of the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, and Skye Perryman, the President and CEO of Democracy Forward. Another I would mention is Elizabeth Reiner Platt, the director of the Law, Rights, and Religion Project at Union Theological Seminary. And Liz offers a reflection on how communities are exercising their free exercise rights in the immigration context, and how this draconian crackdown on immigration by the Trump administration has elicited a religious freedom response from so many different groups around our country, whether that's in protesting or trying to access detention centers or sensitive locations, stopping ICE from going into houses of worship. I want to mention all 20, but two more that I'll highlight are the co-chairs of the Congressional Free Thought Caucus. Both offered their own contribution. That's Congressman Jamie Raskin from Maryland and Congressman Jared Huffman, the first openly humanist member of Congress. He represents Marin County in California. And so we have religious voices, but also those representing the free thought community as well.
Well, what's a common theme that you see throughout this entire report that really is the takeaway?
I think it's that the two clauses of the First Amendment's religion section, those first 16 words of the First Amendment about Congress not establishing any religion, no state-approved religion, and protecting the free exercise of religion, that these two clauses work together to uphold religious freedom for all. The chair of the Religious Liberty Commission, Dan Patrick, and a really political extremist, has said that the separation of church and state is a lie as part of these commission's proceedings. They try to say the Establishment Clause doesn't really exist. And the free exercise clause means that, if you say you're doing it in the name of God, you can do whatever you want. And so it's a really warped interpretation. I think what our report offers is that these clauses were always meant to go in tandem, that no official government religion is what protects the religious freedom rights of all of us. That everyone, even if you share the religion of the majority, in this country, if you're a Christian, a conservative Christian, you should never want your religion to be officially endorsed by the government, because that takes something away from religion. And that all of us have a right to freely practice our faiths, however that is, or we have the right to not practice any faith at all. That this beautiful, I think, gift of American democracy that we've been entrusted, that was first created 250 years ago, that we're celebrating, is a really unique contribution. In all of human history, we are doing something unique in having this institutional separation of religion and government.
Yeah, it's incredible. It is like the thing we got most right, as we like to say. One of the fun things that happened the day that we released the report is that you went into AI and you just looked at Religious Liberty 250. And I think, one of the reasons we really did this is that we wanted to make sure that the American people and that our democracy understood that there's not just one way of looking at this. And those who want to say that we are a Christian nation and that Christians have a privileged position and that they get to decide for the rest of us what real religion is, they don't have the only word. And so what did you find when you went to ChatGPT or wherever you put it in?
It was a real test of the last year of my life when I put this into Gemini in an incognito window, so it wasn't biased against what I am putting in Gemini. I said, what's going on with religious liberty in America 250? And Gemini said there are two distinct narratives. One is being put out by the Religious Liberty Commission and President Trump and his allies, and the other is being put out by this coalition of Interfaith Alliance and CAP and Americans United, American Humanists, an inclusive vision of religious liberty for all. And I was like, mission accomplished. We walked into the event, I think, already knowing because all of our organizations were putting it out. Many of the contributors to the report put it out themselves on their own platforms. We have effectively and strategically told the American people there are these different visions. And we know from public opinion which side the American people are on. They're on our side of an inclusive religious liberty vision for all.
Yeah. How do people find the report? What's the best way to make sure that everyone gets to read it? I will say the nice thing about this is that each of the contributions is not so long. You won't get lost in it. You can, they're each around, what would you say, 800 to 1,000 words? I mean, they're really readable. They're compelling. You can learn so much by accessing this report. Where can people find it?
You can find it at americanprogress.org or by, our SEO is very good. So you can search Religious Liberty for All. I think it'll come up in the first few results. And yes, my mom actually just texted me this morning. It was really, really great. I know she's a biased reviewer of the work, but she said, I liked the way I could tackle it a bit at a time. Nice. So it is 25 pages long, but you can take each one and kind of sit with these diverse leaders and what they're offering to this country at this time in American history.
Guthrie, what are we going to hear next?
We're going to hear an introduction to the event from Neera Tanden, the president and CEO of the Center for American Progress. And Cap was host of the event in their space a few blocks away from the White House. Then you'll hear some of the first panel, on which Paul is joined by Rachel Lazar from Americans United for Separation of Church and State and American Humanist Association leader Fish Stark.
As we all know, this year, the United States marks its 250th anniversary. It's a moment to recall the freedoms this country was founded on, and few of those matter more than the freedom to believe as we choose. Religious liberty has been a cornerstone of our democracy from the very beginning, which is what makes the path the Trump administration has chosen so incredibly dangerous. In May of last year, the administration created a Religious Liberty Commission to push Americans towards their particular view of faith, one that excludes so many people, almost everyone else. Religious liberty does not belong to any one tradition, any one party, or any one administration. It belongs to every American, every human being. That is what brought our organizations together to offer a different answer. We invited scholars, historians, legal experts, faith leaders, and theologians from across the country to describe what religious freedom means in their lives and, most importantly, in their work. Their views don't always perfectly line up. Indeed, that is the point. But they share a belief in pluralism, in human dignity, and in the constitutional framework that lets very different communities live side by side as equals. I think it is a crucial ideal that our commitment to religious liberty has been one of the reasons that we have been able to live together across many differences over the last 200 years. And when we weaken religious liberty and when we choose one religion over another, that tends to fray the social fabric itself. The resulting report from the work all of these groups have done is a strong defense of the First Amendment and the separation of church and state, and really in honest history. It is a reminder that we are a nation of many faiths and also a nation where it is fine to practice no faith, that we are free to choose what we believe based on our own consciences, not the direction of government. So I'm glad to welcome three leaders who have spent their careers on these questions. First, Rachel Laser is the president and CEO of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. Reverend Paul Raushenbush is the president and CEO of Interfaith Alliance. And Fish Stark, who has one of the greatest names in Washington, D.C., is the executive director of the American Humanist Association.
Thank you so much, Neera. My name is Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush from Interfaith Alliance, and I want to thank Center for American Progress for hosting this gathering, and a strong and robust welcome to all of you for this launch of the report, Religious Liberty for All, Celebrating This Founding Freedom at America 250. This afternoon, we are asking the pointed question, religious freedom for whom? And offering the resounding answer, religious freedom for all. The Trump administration's Religious Liberty Commission will soon be issuing a report that we have every reason to believe will offer a perspective of religious freedom that privileges one narrow, particular experience. However, the report we are launching today intentionally features a range of experiences of religious freedom, from voices that include diverse religious traditions as well as non-religious traditions. Religious freedom for all recognizes how religious freedom can benefit all the people when it is applied equally and fairly. I want to thank the teams that helped to create this Religious Freedom for All report, including Guthrie Graves-Fitzsimmons, Maggie Siddiqui from Interfaith Alliance, Rachel Deitch at American Humanist Association, Mari Hiroshi and Dina Sher from Americans United, and Emma Hobart at CAP, as well as the 20 individuals who contributed to this amazing report, Religious Liberty for All, Celebrating This Founding Freedom at America 250. To start us off, I am honored to introduce Rachel Laser, who is the president and CEO of Americans United for Separation of Church and State, and Fish Stark, executive director of American Humanist Association, who will both offer brief remarks along with myself, and then we will have time for a couple questions. So, Rachel, let's turn it over to you.
Hi, it's so nice to see so many friends and authors from the report in the audience. I want to extend a very warm welcome to you true patriots who are here to celebrate the unique American invention of church-state separation and religious freedom. Hats off to you. What a way to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our freedom from kings who ruled over both church and state. Good for you. Thanks for being here. I'd like to note that in very divided times, it continues to be church-state separation that unites us across our differences. And you'll see that in this report. I have tremendous gratitude to this unique group that came together to deliver this report in this event. And it's so important to correct that false record of the so-called Religious Liberty Commission and this report that's coming out. I'd also like to remark on how, at least I feel, amidst this chaotic moment, a real calm here, the kind of calm that comes from knowing that you're right. We are correcting, right? Yes, thank you, Alessandro. We are correcting the record here, right? We're correcting the record, and with Christians, Muslims, Jews, Hindus, Sikhs, agnostics, humanists, many lawmakers, right? We are correcting the record about what the true foundational values are of this country. And we're proudly reminding America that religious freedom means we are all free to live as ourselves and believe as we choose, so long as you don't harm others, right? So these authors of this report are right. When Thomas Jefferson wrote about the underlier of the religious freedom protections in the First Amendment, the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom that he authored, he said that religious freedom, quote, is meant to comprehend within the mantle of its protection the Jew and the Gentile, the Christian and, to use his antiquated language, Mohammedan, the Hindu and the infidel of every faith. That was such a radical idea back then, but it's American History 101. So that's what religious freedom is. Here's what it's not. It's not a sword to harm others. It's not a license to discriminate. It's not a permission slip for the government to favor one set of religious views or to impose those views on all of its workers. It's not a trump card to play when someone else's views are politically inconvenient. Our first president made this clear. When George Washington was stumping for the ratification of the First Amendment, he wrote what is now a famous letter to some happy Jews of Toro Synagogue in 1790. And he said that our country gives, quote, to bigotry, no sanction, to persecution, no assistance. But unfortunately, a lot of government high-ranking officials are getting this very wrong today. The so-called Religious Liberty Commission is undermining our religious diversity and advancing one narrow set of ultra-conservative, one type of Christian values. Secretary Rollins at the U.S. Department of Agriculture is imposing her personal religious views on a captive audience of all 100,000 employees there. The Department of Defense and Department of Labor and Small Business Administration are holding monthly prayer services in our agencies. Lawmakers across this land are rewriting the 10 Commandments and then imposing them on captive audiences of school children in 4 states. And in all of these cases, we're suing. So yeah, with a lot of our allies. And there was a time where we might have hoped that the Supreme Court would have been a backstop to this. Obviously not today. This is my final words. Less oi, more joy. The joy of church-state separation, that American original, that guarantee of a secular government that doesn't favor any of us over any other because of our religious beliefs. Our founders got certain things wrong. They got this very right. And if we want to see our country survive and thrive for another 250 years, it's time to recommit to that foundational promise of church-state separation. Thanks.
Well said, Rachel. My name is Fish Stark. That's fish like the animal, Stark like Iron Man. When Neera Tanden says you have the coolest name in Washington, D.C., that is a compliment you take to your grave. I was telling Paul and Rachel before this is the last big event I'm doing before my wedding. When a Unitarian humanist marries a secular Jew, we call that an interfaithless marriage. It's a religious freedom joke for you today. At the American Humanist Association, I have the privilege of representing the 30% of Americans who identify as humanist, atheist, agnostic, or non-religious. And we were proud to help bring this incredible report into being because when the White House assembled its sham of a religious liberty commission, there were 15 members and a third of the country was excluded. We know why. Secretary Hegseth has already called humanism an infection. Vice President Vance has said that without traditional religious beliefs, it is impossible for people like me to have a value system or even to love. But the people in this room know we are not a mistake. We are not an infection. We are not some problem to be solved. We are your neighbors, living out our religious freedom alongside you. The administration sows fear of religious diversity and weaponizes it to keep us divided and dismantle our civil rights, but we know the power and the beauty of what people with different beliefs can create together. My humanism calls me to believe in people, to take the natural instinct to believe in something bigger than yourself and place that faith in my neighbors, to insist that people are not born broken, but see them for their strengths and potential, to see differences in belief not as a threat, but as a gift, to believe that a better world comes not from imposing my will on my neighbors, but us all finding the way through together. The dream that humanists have woven into the American story, from Thomas Paine to Frederick Douglass to Gloria Steinem, is the dream that a country of free minds becomes a country where people can realize their limitless potential. Religious liberty is about so much more than the freedom to pray. It's about a nation where everyone has the safety of knowing they belong, where everyone has the freedom to choose the sources of meaning and wisdom that guide their lives. A nation where everyone's rights are protected by a system of secular law, because we know that in a democracy, there's no higher authority than the people. A nation where religious liberty protects not just our right to worship, but our right to live free from discrimination in healthcare, in housing, in education. A nation where no one can be denied essential medical care because of their employer's religious beliefs. A nation where our tax dollars don't go to private schools that discriminate against kids for their religion. A nation where my tax dollars aren't used to teach kids that my family and I are going to hell. A nation where no one can be fired for who they love or whether they pray. It is about the idea that people deserve equal access, equal dignity, and equal recognition regardless of what they believe. Most Americans reject white Christian nationalism, this vision of supremacy deceptively wrapped up in the idea of freedom, because they recognize that Christian nationalists don't want freedom. They want money and power. Christian nationalists and their billionaire backers want to privatize our public schools, our public housing, our public media, anything else they can get their hands on, and replace it with a system that serves them first and best while lining their pockets. But in every state, when given the chance, voters demand public services that serve all of us equally. So it's a dark moment, but 250 years ago, a free thinker named Thomas Paine told a frightened young country that we have it in our power to begin the world over again. He was talking about building a nation that was immune to tyranny, a nation where your conscience is your own, your neighbor's is theirs, and we build the future side by side. That is the work we're doing. That is the American version of religious freedom we are talking about in this report. Those are humanist values, and they're American values, and we have it in our power to make them real. Thank you for believing in it.
Religious diversity has been a fact of this country since long before its founding. And religious diversity was the reality when the Declaration of Independence was signed 250 years ago. One of the ideals that our founders got most right was that religious freedom must be afforded to all, not some privileged few. We celebrate that freedom here today. Unfortunately, all throughout our history, this revolutionary idea of religious freedom has also been tested and challenged, particularly by some strains of white Protestant Christians who want to name America as a Christian nation that they conveniently remake in their own image so that they might hold privilege and power. We are in another one of those perilous moments. Religious liberty now is contested as we celebrate our 250th anniversary. From January 20th of 2025, Interfaith Alliance has tracked the way this administration has weaponized faith, simultaneously making brazen claims about God being on their side, while attacking any faith tradition and expression that is not in lockstep with their own political agenda and worldview. We see this happening at the federal level as well as in states and local communities. Claiming God exclusively for one's own side is part of the broader authoritarian playbook at work around the world and in America today. However, the very good news is that broad coalitions of civic and faith groups are not allowing that claim to go uncontested. As we sit here today launching on our own report, We at Interfaith Alliance are also currently suing the administration's Religious Liberty Commission in federal court for lack of diversity and transparency, joined by our fellow plaintiffs, Muslims for Progressive Values, Sikh American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and Hindus for Human Rights. We are represented by Americans United and Democracy Forward and asking the court to rule that the Trump Commission was created and is operating in violation of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Interfaith Alliance has also pushed back at the way that ICE cruelty has challenged its policies towards sensitive locations and now allows agents to go into houses of worship. We've also countered attacks on prominent faith leaders and charities persecuted for daring to preach empathy and solidarity rather than hate and fear. While we have had to take defensive measures, the real story is how the American people have shown up with ever greater strength and conviction in small towns across America and here in the nation's capital. We have seen the power of we the people, very much including religious Americans eager to join together to insist on a future America that includes people of diverse faiths, worldviews, and beliefs, and organizing to ensure that all are able to exercise their constitutional right to religious freedom. Religious freedom is inherent in the American project. It is our birthright. It is our strength. Religious diversity and religious freedom go hand in hand. And religious freedom is only true when it is afforded to all of the people. I think for me, just read each of these perspectives and recognize that they actually fit together as a beautiful mosaic of what is America. It includes humanists, it includes people from all different backgrounds with deep convictions about their own faith or whatever their worldview is, understanding that religious freedom protects all of them together. And it refuses, actually religious freedom in its foundation, refuses to pit people against one another. It actually gives space for everyone. And so I think that's like a message I would love for people to take away from this. We need to take a quick break, but up next, more from Religious Liberty for All, celebrating this founding freedom at America 250. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And make sure you ask Alexa, Gemini, or Siri to play the podcast, The State of Belief, on any enabled device. Make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.
This episode is brought to you by Google Health. Stop chasing someone else's definition of health. What matters is what's healthy for you. Google Health offers a new kind of coach built with Gemini for effortless tracking, sleep insights, and holistic coaching tailored to you. Visit googlestore.com to learn more and start a new relationship with your health. Requires Google account, Google Health app, internet, and Google Health Premium subscription. Features subject to change. Availability and results vary. Not intended for medical purposes. Works independently of Gemini apps. Check responses for accuracy.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Bring a date, your squad, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush. I'm with my colleague, Dr. Guthrie Graves-Fitzsimmons, to present some highlights from Religious Liberty for All, celebrating this founding freedom at America 250. There was a second panel. It featured Hindus for Human Rights Senior Policy Director Ria Chakrabarti, Adam Russel Taylor, president of Sojourners, and Chris Crawford from Interfaith America. You'll also hear Center for American Progress Senior Vice President Ben Olinsky asking a couple questions.
As a Hindu American, this is existential. Religious liberty is nothing more or less than being able to practice your own faith fully as the way you want it to be. And growing up here in the US, that has been the case for me forever. It's also a lot of fun to have friends from all over and have people of different faiths mixing. So one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about over the last week particularly is the joy, particularly in New York City, not just about the Knicks winning, but how everybody from different faith communities are coming together, and celebrating the diversity of the city. But that's not unique to New York City. That's something we see in small towns and big cities across the country. And as we move forward, I think holding on to that joy is really important. For all the things that the government tries to do to impose a Christian nationalist vision, this joy is what will keep us sustained as we fight those kinds of policies.
Well, first, I want to thank all the organizations that helped make this report possible. I'll just say that I am feeling much better than I sound. Got a little raspy voice, but bear with me. So this isn't a really exceptional report, so I highly recommend you read it. I'm not just saying that because I wrote one of the small, short essays in it, but it really is timely. And I agree with Rachel that we should be celebrating this American invention of the separation of church and state and of really embracing religious freedom and enshrining it in our Constitution. That is really important, right? And I agree that it is kind of a linchpin that helps protect so many of our other rights. I want to personalize it a little bit. So my parents made the controversial decision to get married in 1968, just a year after interracial marriage was legalized in this country through the case Loving versus Virginia. And my mother's Black, my father's white. And they instilled in me this really strong belief that my generation inherited the unfinished business of the civil rights struggle, but also that kind of my diversity as someone who's biracial was a strength and not something to be feared or would be a weakness. But in a larger sense, they instilled in me a really strong belief that our nation's growing racial and religious diversity, and they're really clear about it, they're both Christian, but that our religious diversity was a fundamental strength of our nation. I have 2 kids that are now teenagers. We are a huge Marvel family. And the way I think about this and the way I talk about it is our religious pluralism is one of our superpowers as a nation. And yet there are many still in this nation that want to treat it like it's kryptonite. And I really agree with Paul that we are in a moment where our religious freedom, our religious liberty cannot be taken for granted, that it is under assault. And in a year that we are commemorating 250 years of the founding of our Declaration of Independence, it is painfully ironic that we are facing one of the greatest assaults on so many of the core freedoms, including religious freedom, as well as on our democratic system itself. So that's why I think this is a moment to be vigilant. I think it's a moment to be really clear-eyed about the threat that we face. And yes, it's a moment where we can be joyful about how much religious freedom has already brought us. Last thing I just want to emphasize, and I'm going to speak in this case as a Baptist minister, we should talk a lot about Jefferson and Madison and others, but we also need to bring into the conversation Roger Williams, who was one of the founders of the Baptist faith and the founder of Rhode Island, the first state that enshrined a commitment to the separation of church and state. And he did that in part because he believed that any time you coerce or impose your Christian faith on someone else, it is no longer authentic, that actually harms the cause of the Great Commission, something I believe deeply in. And so I can't remember a number of you made this point. I just want to underscore it. I think Rabbi Saperstein made it actually, that our religious freedom has enabled religion to thrive in America. And we need to protect it and we need to strengthen it to ensure that happens going forward.
The way that we think about this at Interfaith America is, in addition to the legal structure of religious liberty, religious liberty depends on a culture of religious pluralism, where we are understanding that diversity is a fact, but pluralism is a strength, when we can engage with our diversity and work together across differences for the common good. And so that's what we would emphasize, and what I would emphasize is that in order to have a thriving religious liberty moving forward, we have to celebrate our differences and also welcome people to bring the particularities of their faith to the public square. I think that some people have this outdated notion that to believe in pluralism or do interfaith work, you have to water down your faith, and that's not the case. We want everyone at the table.
Thank you, Chris. Let me, Adam, I want to come back to you just for a second. I'm curious about your take on, do people have the right to practice their faith in the public square? How can you make sure that any public practice of faith is both true to values, as Chris just talked about, but also respects the pluralism of our nation? Or do you think the public square really should be a totally secularized space?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I strongly believe that people should be able to bring their faith into the public square. I actually think it would be a betrayal of our commitment to religious liberty if we denied them that ability. I think the question is more about how and where do you kind of cross a line. There is some tension between a commitment to religious freedom and the commitment to the non-establishment clause. And the Supreme Court has tried to navigate that over time. We don't have to go into all the legalese of it, but there's a lemon test for a while. Now the Supreme Court has moved in a much more accommodationist direction that I think is not helpful and could be dangerous. But I'll just kind of put it this way. Would we really have wanted Dr. Martin Luther King to hold back and not apply his faith to the public realm, right? And I think he's a model of how you do it well. I'm glad that he was very clear and very assertive with what he believed his faith had to say about civil rights and about issues of Jim Crow segregation and more. But he was able to both appeal to people's faith and to the Constitution itself and to the promises of our democracy. And he did it in a way that was always inclusive. He was not trying to Christianize America. He was trying to ensure that America lived up to its full promise and become a truly just multiracial democracy. Quickly, I want to contrast kind of two extremes, though, that I think kind of help us understand how not to do it, okay? On the more kind of Christian nationalist extreme, but I'm even going to take it back further to the founding of the religious right as a movement in this country. There is a lot of revisionist history that unfortunately many of us have internalized, right? Not just about the founding of the country, but also about the founding of the religious right. There's this misnomer, the religious right was founded as a movement against abortion, which is absolutely untrue. The religious right was a political creature. It was a deal between Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell initially to create a political party that would harness the grievance, the white grievance that many whites in the South in particular felt after the passage of the 64 Voting Rights or Civil Rights Act and then the 65 Voting Rights Act. And the Civil Rights Act was forcing the desegregation of Christian colleges and schools, including Bob Jones University, which ultimately went to the Supreme Court. And so they created a movement that tried to take over one political party, the Republican Party, and create a loyal constituency, which was quite successful, to that agenda. I would argue not only did that movement have racist, poisonous roots, they made the mistake of allowing their faith to become instrumentalized and ultimately co-opted. So that is the wrong way, right? But I also don't believe that we should practice a kind of secular fundamentalism that says that we need to banish our faith from public life. And I don't think anyone on this panel is saying that. That's not what the report is saying. But there are sometimes pockets within the left and among some Democrats that I think you hear some of this hostility toward faith. And I think some of it comes from real feelings of hurt and exclusion, which I'm deeply saddened about. But I think we've got to model a healthier version of what it means to put our faith into public life, because it is an essential part of what can enable us to achieve the common good.
I want to go to Chris just to follow up on what you said, which was, some have suggested that America was founded fundamentally as a Christian nation. Chris, do you agree with that, or do you disagree with that?
So this is one of the most frequent questions that I think we hear about religion in relation to the 250th. And I think it's actually a good example of the way that we can deceptively divide ourselves on an area that we actually have a lot of common ground. And what do I mean by that? I mean that most people are going to try to answer that question with one of two things in mind. On the one hand, they want to celebrate Christian contributions to the founding. They want to celebrate the way that Christians have contributed to our public life, on the one hand, or they want to highlight that we don't have a state-established religion and the beauty of the separation of church and state. But where most Americans are is actually living with both of those things being true. And there's Pew data about this from, I think, 2022, that there was a higher number than some people might have thought. 45% of Americans said the United States is a Christian nation. But of that 45%, only 28% said that we should be declared a Christian nation. And a majority of that 45% said that no religion should ever be declared the official state religion. Now, in the same poll, 77% of everybody in the United States said that houses of worship should stay out of politics as far as endorsing candidates. So this is where Americans already are. I think as we get to the 250th, we need to be truthful about our history of the founding and beyond. I have a book by our founder of Interfaith America, Eboo Patel, behind me. In this book, he talks about the phrase Judeo-Christian nation. We hear a lot of people now talk about us being founded as a Judeo-Christian nation. But as a country, we were largely understood as a Protestant nation founded by mostly Protestants. But it was in the national interest to expand this idea of who belonged in the United States over time. So in the 1930s, this Judeo-Christian idea came in so that Catholics like myself and our Jewish brothers and sisters could be a part of that national fabric. The question for us today is, how do we define our religious adherence now? And to me and to Eboo in the book, it's that we are an interfaith country. We have so many different people from so many different faiths who are contributing to our country. And we want to build a country where we can all belong and work for the common good. And I think the question for Christians isn't, are we a Christian nation? It is, as Christians, do we have religious freedom? Can we thrive? Can we work for the common good? And also, can everyone else do the same thing?
Ria, I want to come to you next. I think, like me, you're not a member of one of the majority faiths in the country, and there are plenty of people who are of no faith, as we've heard. What are some of the special considerations we have to be thoughtful of for religious minorities in the country?
So I think when it comes to religious minorities, the First Amendment has been such an important gift, right? It allows people to worship as they want. Now, that means that there hasn't been like a civil rights movement to consider religious minorities full human beings alongside the majority community, in contrast to the way that like any person of color has had to negotiate their full personhood. But what we have seen is waves and changes in the way that society has treated any religious minority, people of no faith, and how do we negotiate that, like moving forward between our neighbors and friends and even just coworkers, right? In communities, particularly places where you don't have a lot of religious diversity, or if you do, there is this like dominant narrative of we are a Christian nation. Okay, but what does that actually mean for the safety of houses of worship? Even if they're allowed to be built, right? Like, are they being protected? And are they being protected in a way that makes those congregants feel safe, right? The DHS has programs to protect houses of worship, but if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, if you're Hindu, even certain Christian houses of worship serve immigrants. How do we keep our houses of worship safe when you have a virulently anti-immigrant DHS? How do you preserve trust with law enforcement to be able to combat and enforce like anti-hate laws around religious minorities? Those are like real questions that I think are hard to answer here, but they are an important part of how we actually live through religious freedom. And we'll see.
Guthrie, we had the pleasure of listening to Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. Now, he's really an important contributor to this, wasn't he?
He is. He's a graduate of Yale Divinity School. He's a ruling elder in the Presbyterian Church USA. And Senator Coons throughout my 15 years of working at the intersection of religion and public policy, has been the champion of getting progressives to care about religious liberty and the broader role of religion in public life. I've worked with him throughout my career. During the first Trump administration, I wrote a daily prayer newsletter called The Resistance Prays. Every day we prayed together, and Chris Coons actually wrote one of those prayer letters himself.
Wow.
And so Coons has been such an ally, and to have him keynote this event was so meaningful to me personally, and I think the entire movement.
And he also has an incredible essay in the actual report. So make sure you go to the Center for American Progress, find this incredible report, and let's listen to Senator Chris Coons of Delaware.
Thank you to Cap. Thank you to everybody who's been on the panels today. And thank you in particular for Religious Liberty for All, a report that I actually genuinely enjoyed reading. Senators do still occasionally read. And I'm just going to give you an early warning. The vote on the War Powers Act resolution just got called. So since it's going to pass or fail by one vote, it is not a lack of enthusiasm for hanging out and talking and reconnecting. But if they go, you got to go, I got to go, because this is one we might actually pass. And credit, yeah. I'd like to give a lot of credit to Tim Kaine, a dear friend and colleague who has been relentless and persistent in advocating for peace and for Congress to reassert its role. So thanks to Cap and to everybody who's helped make this report possible, and to everybody who's spoken today. I'm just going to conclude with what I hope are simple observations, but in a current context where it always bears repeating. In 1790, President Washington wrote a letter to the Hebrew congregation of Newport, probably cited earlier today. The government of the United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens. We are a nation founded on religious liberty, a nation where so many millions came from other places where there was an established state religion, where refusing to participate in it or contribute to it or support it or name your children according to its conventions was cause for literal physical repression, imprisonment, or marginalization. We were founded by those who were seeking to practice in good conscience and independent of government control, but not uniformly. Obviously, there were different foundings in different places, and the Mayflower Bay Colony had a different vision. Georgia had a different vision. Rhode Island had a different vision. Pennsylvania, just north of me, of the state of Delaware, had a different vision. But the very small town of Hockessin, Delaware, where I grew up, if I just looked around and if I've watched it develop over the decades of my life, helps show the geography and the topography of the diversity of faith in our country. I grew up less than a mile from a Quaker meeting house that had been there since the 1740s. Folks who'd fled the United Kingdom, England, and that's why they were called Quakers. They refused to bow down to obey government authority, to pay taxes in some cases, to serve in the military, and they resisted the violence of the age, and they, rather than fight back against those arresting them, would sit and quake in their place. Their strong, persistent, quiet, but effective early voice for abolition and for freedom of conscience helped shape the community I was raised in. There was also, of course, a Presbyterian church, a Methodist church. Wilmington's also the site of the first free Black church in North America. And every year we celebrated August quarterly, now more than 200 years of a large religious celebration that was about freedom and faith. If I go back to that same small town I grew up in today, it has the largest Hindu temple in a 3-state region, and a Chinese evangelical church, neither of which were there when I was a child, but reflects the fact that through constant change and immigration, we have welcomed, celebrated, and nurtured very wide varieties of expression. Whether in a church, a mosque, a temple, at home, in the civic space, in speaking and writing and thinking and praying, the ways in which Americans have engaged with conscience and ethics has also driven political change in fundamental ways. From the abolition of slavery to the assertion of labor rights, from civil rights to rights for so many groups so long marginalized, whether it's LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, or the rights of so many minorities in my state and around our country. They were overwhelmingly driven by the experiences and the voices of people of faith who chose to resist the majority culture of the time, the legal system of the time, or the repression and marginalization of the time. The Underground Railroad ran right through Delaware. I just this weekend was at Tubman Garrett Park, named for Harriet Tubman, I suspect known to all of you as one of the conductors from slavery to freedom from the eastern shore of Maryland up through Wilmington and into Philadelphia. But I bet fewer of you know of Thomas Garrett, a prominent Quaker, an abolitionist, someone who risked imprisonment, who is buried out on Quaker Hill in Wilmington, Delaware. The two of them helped more than 2,000 people to freedom. Whether or not in the United States or in other places around the world where I've lived and worked in repressive and authoritarian countries, there is an unavoidable link between freedom of thought, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, and freedom more broadly. Authoritarianism seeks to compel, seeks to repress, seeks to prevent free thought, free worship, free expression. And so at a time when leaders in our country and in our government speak out and claim this is a white Christian nation, claim and assert repeatedly that we have been, are, and will always be a Christian nation, when they talk about really profoundly misguided notions about how immigrants are poisoning the blood of our nation, when they align themselves with those who deny the Holocaust or spew hate against women or minorities or Jews, when pastors aligned with our president bless a large golden statue of him as if they were at the very foot of Mount Sinai, we have to take a moment and reflect on whether this is or isn't what our nation has been and would be. I think they missed Washington's message that we as a nation should give bigotry no sanction. And I think by cherry picking passages and places and moments across our history, you can construct a misleading and false dialogue, a line, a narrative that this is a Christian nation exclusively. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with John Adams and the Treaty of Tripoli, but I just have to bring it up. A passage in this early treaty between the United States and the Bey of Tripoli, the Muslim leader of Tripoli, says explicitly, the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. John Adams had something to do with the founding and framing of our country, but a more recent and well and widely regarded president, someone celebrated by the right and left, said, we establish no religion in this country, we command no worship, we mandate no belief, nor will we ever. Ronald Reagan in 1984. In my view, my faith is in no way harmed or threatened by those who are humanists, who are agnostics, who are atheists, or practitioners of any other faith. In fact, it is strengthened. I happen to be a believing, practicing Christian, but I also represent 1 million people. And I'm really clear that the 1 million people I serve and who hired me include lots of people of goodwill who do not practice faith and don't want me talking about it. And I try to balance that, to be honest with the people I represent about what moves me, to work tirelessly for my neighbor, to love my neighbor, as it were, but how it is even more important to me that they have space and room to live and breathe free. In my faith tradition, one of the most foundational verses is Galatians 3:28. There is no longer Jew nor Greek, slave nor free. There is no longer male nor female, for all of you are one in Christ. Would that my faith would live that simple dicta. How could you miss that point? And yet, in a fallen world, so many institutions continue to seek to divide us by background, by language, by ethnicity, or by faith. Religious freedom, as I've said, is a fundamental threat to authoritarianism. And it is because of our commitment to a freedom of faith that we are also, as a nation, committed to an equality of all. All men are created equal, says the Constitution. But if we are to make that real, we have to act on it. I know you talked in some brief amount about the No Ban Act. To me, one of the most appalling things that President Trump did in his first term was to seek repeatedly to impose so-called Muslim bans. I have failed to recruit Republicans to co-sponsor with me, but in the House and Senate, we will continue to attempt to move a law that prevents a religious-based test for admission to this country. If we allow to slip away a fundamental commitment to religious liberty, we no longer deserve to be the nation that is as committed to freedom as we've been since we started. I reject the idea that the Bible I read is a partisan political document and contains a blueprint for any one political orientation. So I think it is the job of a senator to hold fast to the foundational freedoms of our republic. I think freedom of religion is among those most basic and eternal. And I think when we fail to remember that and to give it life and purpose and meaning, we no longer deserve the freedoms for which our forebears fought. To defend our nation and what it means is to defend religious freedom. To defend our Constitution is to defend religious freedom. To defend religious freedom is to defend ourselves, our future, and our very republic. Thank you for the chance to be with you. I look forward to some questions.
David Smith of The Guardian, thinking of the 250th anniversary, do you worry that President Trump and his allies are using this moment to rewrite history and make it about a story of heroic white Christian men?
Is he attempting that? Absolutely. The Garden of Heroes and the revision of a variety of parts of our national history is an appalling misrepresentation. I'm of the belief that when we look clearly at the ugliest and most difficult, most challenging chapters in American history, we look at something that we both need to know, need to learn, but also that should be inspiring. One of my role models and heroes in Delaware was a Tuskegee Airman, someone who worked just relentlessly to overcome racial oppression, indifference, and distance within my own community. The idea that they would erase the history of the Tuskegee Airmen from the website of the Department of Defense seems to me both petty, small-minded, and foolish. You can't erase history. You can seek to recast it, but ultimately you do more harm by denying it than you do by embracing it, learning from it, and transcending it.
Do we have a question from the online audience?
We do, Senator. Is it possible that the Christian push of this administration is just another distraction from the power grabs?
Yes. I will say that, there is a certain, there's a distinct community within the conservative evangelical Christian, that sees President Trump as their champion and this as their moment. I just think that's ill-advised at the end of the day. I think one of the real innovations of the American Republic, in sharp contrast to Europe, was ending an established religion such that people were free to decide how to worship, whether to worship, where and when to worship. And it accounts, in my view, for why religious practice and belief remains much more intense and widespread than in Europe. And we could compare and contrast a whole bunch of other regions of the world, but I think it is misguided. And I think by associating faith with the power of the state, you then put at risk the power of faith. And in my party and among more progressive elements in the United States, I think one of the lasting consequences of the rise of the religious right in the 1980s was the suppression of a willingness to speak out among progressives of faith. And I am encouraging a lot of my colleagues who share some of my perspective that my political engagement is largely rooted in my faith and what I saw and learned and heard from my family and my community as a child. Like, I'm not being silent anymore because I refuse to allow a very different view of what Christianity means to actually be the only view that people hear. But I also try to be careful, and I welcome your remarks, input, and criticism to the extent I fail, that I am respectful and inclusive. I think a disrespectful, exclusive view of the relationship between faith and the state is ultimately harmful to both.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Guthrie, thank you so much for all this work and again for being with me on The State of Belief and sharing this incredible program.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks to all the listeners for going and checking out this report.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of hearing this set of experts addressing a critical issue facing America at its 250th anniversary? Please share The State of Belief with them and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to continue growing The State of Belief, so please make a financial contribution today at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. We are going to have Jeffrey Rosen, who is the Emeritus Director of the Constitutional Center in Philadelphia, talk to us about the founding principles of the Constitution and why they matter so much as we celebrate 4th of July on our 250th anniversary. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Raushenbush on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.
I'm Hannah. I've lost 75 pounds in 20 months with GLP-1s, plus diet and exercise. On Ro, I've gone from struggling to run a mile to running farther every day. You can access FDA-approved GLP-1s online. Get the support you need to reach your weight loss goals. Go to ro.co/weight to see if you qualify. I'm a paid Ro partner. 20% average weight loss in 1 year in non-diabetics with obesity or overweight with a weight-related medical condition versus 3.1% in placebo arm. RX only. To stay informed about serious side effects, go to ro.co/safety.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.
Spotify, it's Jay Shetty. Are you one of those media strategy people? Scrolling through spreadsheets, searching for an audience that pays twice as much attention to your ads than they do on social? Let me introduce you to Fans. And they're here with me on Spotify. Trust me, I know Fans. They don't skip, they stay for hours. They don't move on, they manifest. They're not a demographic group, they're fans.
Spotify advertising. You're among fans.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.